So I'd just like to introduce, but before I introduce, we just want to get a sense of like the people in the room. So who is familiar with social finance to like some degree? And put up your hand if you're at all familiar. Okay, so leave your hands up. Who's familiar? Who would say like moderately familiar? Okay, expert level, you really know, like you could sit up here and talk to us about it. Oh. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so like a fairly solid understanding, but we were just trying to gauge like how deep we should go.
And perhaps how many are investor side and how many are investee side?
Yeah, so who's an investor? Who wants to learn about how to invest their money locally? Okay, and who's a business that's looking to get investment?
I'm both.
You're both? All right. Okay,
That's good to know.
Businesses that want to invest locally.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I'll introduce, I'll just jump around. So at the end there, that's Travis Inlow. I had a pleasure, I met Travis I think maybe 2 weeks ago or so over the phone when we chatted. So Travis has a very long and deep history in what I would call traditional investing, is that correct? Yeah. And he's taken those talents and that expertise and is now applying it into the social finance space. He's on the board of Local Investing YYC and also is now working for New Market Funds. So he'll explain more about his roles. In the middle is Jane Bisbee, the Executive Director of the Social Enterprise Fund. I've known Jane Bisbee for 100 years. I was laughing. I've been turned down from the Social Enterprise Fund many times, so if you want to ask me what that feels like, that I can...
There's never turning down, there's always feedback, right?
Yeah, exactly, that's true, yeah, she said...
I just never said yes.
Never said yes. And Wayne and I actually just met, like two minutes ago, and so Wayne works with the McConnell Foundation and is working on the Investment Readiness program, so the IRP program, and we'll explain more. You've also been involved in investing through McConnell Foundation, correct, for a number of years?
No, actually, pretty.
Is it? Oh, okay. Well, there we go. I'm learning stuff too. So the first question I said, we'll jump off from that, and we'll just explain your role and the role of your organization in the social finance ecosystem, and we'll start on the end.
Over here. Great. Hi, everybody. As Brooks mentioned, so I'm call it reformed investment banker, maybe recovering investment banker. Been involved with local investing for 18 months or so. This was an idea that was put together here locally from a group of individuals, as is social finance, from a mix of backgrounds, from real community engagers and business folks that wanted to create a channel for people in our local community to invest into local social enterprises. So how we did that was through a cooperative model, and we raised our first capital raise earlier this year, $500,000, which went extremely well. 49 members from the community participated in that raise, and we deployed that into 3 social enterprises. Fiasco Gelato, that you may know, a company called Lowen's Natural Skincare, started by a local pharmacist here, and BIFCO Framing, which is in the green building energy space. And then along with that, I'm working with a group called New Market Funds. We'll get into some more detail about this, but I'm working with them on how we're building out funds and intermediaries across Canada in preparation for the investment, as part of the investment readiness program, in preparation for the federal social finance fund.
Good afternoon. I work with the Social Enterprise Fund, which works inside the province of Alberta to make loans to social entrepreneurs. We can do equity, but we haven't ventured into that field. We haven't found the right venture yet to do that with. And in 10 years, we've put about 55 million out into 75 different projects. A good half of those have already paid their money back, so this sort of thing works. We've been able to prove that money that comes from local sources invested into local community actually does work in creating impact, creating good businesses, and also returning the cash to the investors. Most of our money comes from the Edmonton Community Foundation, which answered the call of a task force 10 years ago to place at least 10% of their endowments into local place-based impact investing. When they promised to do that 9.5 years ago, they only had 250 million in their endowments. They now have, well, depending what the stock market's like today, about 55 million. So, sorry, 550 million. So that means I have a call on 55 million from them at any time. The first money that came from us was, in fact, from the city of Edmonton. They put about $1.2 million on the table, and we recently were able to demonstrate to them that we've made over $5 million worth of loans out of that original $1.2 million capital. We lend to any corporate structure anywhere in Alberta as long as they have a social purpose mission at their core. That's our point. We've worked in affordable housing, sustainable food projects, creating job opportunities for challenged workers, a lot of arts and culture stuff, anything you can think of where the community needles be moved to the side of good. Stop there.
Cool. Wayne, how about yourself?
Sure. So, excuse me, I'm losing my voice already. My background's more in impact investing abroad in international development settings. So, stumbled into social finance and impact investing, I guess, 10 years ago or so. Founded a B corporation that was doing market intelligence, venture building, impact investing, and capital advisory. So we put to work about $28 million or so into about 100 different ventures across West Africa in particular. Came back to Canada about a couple of years ago and joined McConnell fairly recently. So McConnell Foundation is putting to work sort of 4 different functions in the ecosystem of social finance. So it is, of course, managing its own endowments. So it's also similarly investing its endowments as much as it can into social benefit or community benefit organizations. It's trying to spur or create opportunities around social R&D. So research and development, very well understood in the private sector. Typically 1 to 2% of industry revenues are going towards the next innovation, but in sort of the community benefit or in the social environmental space, very little, if not none. So we're putting about $2 million of investment towards generating new traction there. And then just kind of just 2 more points on McConnell Foundation. We're working on the supply side and the demand side of this social finance equation. So on the supply side, we're working with investors. I don't think social enterprise fund, but investors like social enterprise funds.
Yeah, we have money in you, them, but not in you.
Okay. So working with the intermediaries, so the pools of capital that take that capital and deploy it into the businesses that put their hands up today. And so working on innovation there. So it could be product innovation, geographic innovation, business model innovation, and so forth. And then I'm working more on the demand side. So working with organizations that need that capital, and I'm strengthening organizations to attract that type of capital. So, and that's kind of taking root in this new investment readiness program that we'll talk more about.
The investment readiness program, and I think we'll actually dive into that specific question in a little bit, but I want to come to a bit deeper questions on the mechanisms that you use. So Travis, with you, you said it's a co-op. Local Investing YYC is a co-op. Why a co-op model?
Yeah, I mean, I think one main reason is it's a structure that we can use that allows people to invest in registered accounts. So you can invest with your RSP or TFSA dollars, and we found that's a pretty important piece to allow community members to participate in local investing, as many people will put money into their retirement savings on an annual basis, and being able to connect that with opportunities that align with their values in their local communities is really something we wanted to focus on. As you can imagine, there are a lot of regulations and securities laws that are trying to protect people, but puts up a lot of barriers in how you can actually invest into private businesses. And one way that we were able to work with the securities regulations is to do it through a co-op.
It's probably the easiest and more straightforward way now. The retail products that will do this kind of investing, where you can put your capital in a few far on the ground, so smart move to do it that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so it's, I think if people are familiar with co-ops, there's similar principles that are built in to us as an investment vehicle, but we make equity investments and debt investments as well, so we'll look at, depending on the profile of the businesses and what stage of development they're at, we'll look at a mixture of both those types of investments so that we can generate income that in turn we can pay out as distributions to our investors. But then also we can invest in equity because a lot of these are small businesses that are in a big growth phase, and equity just makes more sense.
So that question actually for both of you then, in how you decide what businesses you're going to invest in. I know, Jane, you said you invest in anybody with a social purpose mission. I heard that's one of the
first
defining
thing.
criteria. So what does that, I know we've had a lot of discussions around like, well, what does that mean? How do you measure that? What do you look at? So that's actually for both of you. How did you choose, so how did Local Investing YYC choose their businesses? And then Jane, how do you make those decisions?
It's a good question. Yeah. I think as maybe Jane just points out, like for us, intentionality is so key. So ensuring that the social model is ingrained into the business is really a critical factor for us. That it's not just a side thought to their main product and service. So when we look at a business, we do have kind of call it the two lenses and doing due diligence on our financial, operational, all the typical stuff that you would do when investing in small businesses. But we take a really good look at the social and environmental side. How much of that is ingrained into the mission of the business, how bought in the individuals are to that, and then we look at opportunities that we can measure it. So there's key metrics that companies can be keeping. We see businesses that say are B Corp certified that need to be identified in ways that they're actually measuring and monitoring their impact on an ongoing basis, and so we look for those types of measures as well.
We very much look for a social mission that's more than a company coming to us and saying, we donate a portion of our profits to a charitable thing. It needs to be more than that because I love those people. They're excellent corporate citizens. That's a good thing to have happen. But in my mind, it doesn't make them an investable social purpose entity in our work. We're looking for how do you treat your workers? How do you treat the environment? How do you live inside the community? Do you do something more that's part of, as you say, baked into the core of what you do? And so that's very much what we're looking at before we even get to the numbers. The numbers is the second part of the world. And I got into a real interesting round of horror when first time I turned down a cooperative, because they didn't have baked into what they were doing a larger social mission. They said, well, we're a co-op. That just means automatically I think there are even some days that not-for-profits could be challenged. Okay, have you really got that at your core? Are you really pushing things further than you should? So it's not a perfect science. We are working. We finally have a new member on our team whose point is to figure out the measurement, the impact measurement piece of it. How do we collect better data? What do we collect? What does it say? What does it tell us about anything? So we're embarking on that. It's been 10 years of searching for the right mechanism, but because our portfolio is so broad, we deal in so many different sectors that we could count people or people housed or tons of carbon and then what does that say to anybody? So I want something that actually says something real about how we're moving the needle in community.
Yeah.
Have either of you heard of the common approach to impact measurement, and what are your thoughts on that? So somewhere kind of across the university.
I've read some about it. It's part of a big pile of stuff. Here, you read it. Yeah. I mean, there's certain common themes in what we're trying to do, and most most of them right now, I think, are interesting in that we've got past the, if you put this many dollars in this, you'll save that many dollars in that. It's got to be more than just a number like that. So I think we're moving towards that, but right now I feel like, hey, that's not my problem.
So, in given that somewhat nebulousness space, and thinking about the businesses in the room that are like, hey, I'm in this space, like, what advice do you have to promote yourself in the, so to not come in and just be like, well, I'm a co-op, and that means we're doing, like, what's some of the kind of, and this is for the whole panel, like, what are some of the things that you would advise, for example, Wayne, you'd advise businesses to say, like, this is how you talk about this social piece in relation to the rest of your business? Like, do you have any advice?
I'm more interested in the intentionality of their core.
Okay, so how does that get uncovered?
It's taking looking at everything that they do, and so I'm not sure that it's.
When you say everything to do, sorry to cut you off. What are you saying?
Yeah.
Like as personal citizens and like the people in the business?
How do you treat your workers? Do you pay a living wage?
Okay. What if they don't have workers at
benefit?
this point? Like, what if it's an idea on the page, or it's been like kind of.
Well,
Best opportunity to integrate it then.
Yeah. Okay.
One way, the simplest way might be if you look at B corporations, and they've got sort of 5 different dimensions. So governance, workers, environment, I'm missing 2, social, and I'm missing a couple, but they're sort of spelled out in relatively.
Transparency.
Okay, yeah. So they're spelled out in relatively accessible, non-jargony terminology. And there's a free assessment. So you can just go on, I think it's like 20 or 30 questions. You'll sort of self-rate yourself and see how you're doing. And a lot of it is process related. So it's kind of, do you have, I don't know, a waste management and recycling sort of policy? But it's meant to be a proxy for sort of a mindset. It's meant to be a proxy for the intentionality, I think we're hearing, around sort of your active role stewarding the environmental question, for instance.
I have a question. When you mentioned social R&D, so the question is, like, can you explain that? And then, is that a pipeline into social enterprise or investment, and how does that kind of work?
Yeah, great question. So social R&D is relatively new. I think there's not too many things that I can point to say that is social R&D. But it's essentially very early stage innovation. So you start with a big problem and you try to find solutions that could tackle that problem. And so social R&D is the financing or it's the investment into that process. And it is typically quite process oriented. If either of you have examples of it, I'm happy to chime in. I guess the question on, does that ever lead to a social enterprise, or could that lead to a future social finance investment opportunity? The answer is not necessarily so. So R&D can basically be the equivalent of basic research in the private sector. So it may or may not ever commercialize, it may or may not ever get to market. And that's just the nature of R&D. So.
Yeah, I think one big thing is that, there's such broad definitions around what impact is. You look at...
And it could be bad.
It could be. Yeah, so is it net positive impact? But different business models are going to obviously have different types of impact. You could have a business that is tangibly contributing to some positive solutions through their product or services. You might have other businesses that, the end product is a tasty, gelato that I think that's a net zero in my mind, so you get a sugary dessert, but it makes me feel good, so. But, is that, contributing to some major, solution in our communities? It's more about the operations and the intention around their operations. And so I think the definition around it has to make sense for whatever business that people are investing in. But the intentionality of having that in your business model is the critical piece.
So I'm pretty excited because I think we have a really interesting, like 3 interesting points of view at the same type of system, right? So the next question I want to ask is, what are barriers and issues that you most commonly see in the space? So Jane, you being around with Social Enterprise Fund and loaning out money for years, like what are, I'm sure you come across the same conversations all the time. Travis, from your perspective, coming into this from traditional banking background, and kind of like where do you see kind of the sticky parts or some stuff that you might have went like, this is weird. Like, why is it happening this way? And then like, from you on the supply and the demand side and kind of like, you know, obviously running around now and engaging on both those pieces, what are you seeing? So, and anybody can take this up first, but yeah, barriers or issues you commonly see, and that can be from the investment side or the social enterprise side.
Well, maybe I'll talk about what happens when you get to step 2. So we've ticked off mission.
This is basically me going like, why have I never gotten anywhere?
Because I didn't want you to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
And that's only half of what.
Yeah.
The next piece that's really, really important for me, because remember, I'm lending, you're buying money from me. You're buying a thing, which you're going to use to do another thing. And so I look really carefully at 2 main sections. One, do you actually have an understanding of your customer and your revenue stream? Do you know where your money's coming from? And I have strange ideas sometimes about what revenue is. For example, I think grants are revenue, right? What is government other than a procurement agency that we as a community have decided we're going to I'm not going to go out and buy roads by myself, right? But we've all joined together and we've appointed this group of people and they're going to buy the roads for us. They're our purchasing agent. So when I look at a nonprofit business plan, for example, I'm looking to see, do they understand that government is their customer in this space? And do they actually, have they done things in a way that their customer is going to keep buying their service? One of the first nonprofit groups that came to me with a proposal said, we've lost a government grant, so we're going to try this social enterprise thing. And I said, actually, you've lost your primary customer. You better figure out what's wrong about your product offering that they no longer want to buy your services. That's kind of weird thinking for. So I'm looking to see, have they got anything close to that kind of thinking? And that's a big barrier, is that we don't often help entrepreneurs, regardless of what they're doing, understand that's number 1. Right. And it's about how you understand those relationships. So I'm looking for that. Yeah. And I'm looking for whether or not there are people in the room who have the capacity then to deliver on what they've said their plan is. Right. Do they have the connections? Do they know all of that kind of stuff?
So that's you see that missing quite often. Yeah.
And some people think that we would work like a bank and just look at financial statements and run ratios and all that kind of thing. I've found that our work is, I think, closer to what an angel investor would do. Because the ratios in that don't work. There's nothing for us to test against. A traditional banker has kind of a set of norms that he can look up. If he runs the ratio on your financial statements, he can tell certain things about how you're working within certain industry norms. And this stuff that we're all doing, there's no rules up there yet, because a lot of it's cutting edge stuff or different. And so how do we use it? So I find looking for the sort of tests of, do they know customer? Do they have a revenue stream? And do they know as a manager what they're doing? Far more useful.
When you're working on the supply and the demand side, it sounds like both sides. So where do you see the barriers and issues there?
Yeah, and it might vary by stage of the organization. So maybe I'll just talk about that as well. So some groups I'm meeting are just scratching this for the first time. So just kind of dipping their toe in, learning about social finance, learning about social enterprise. And for them, I think it's just, getting the board behind them, kind of navigating that and sort of dedicating the time to the right supports that would be right for them. So rather than kind of doing a deep dive over an 8-month period, trying to find resources that would get the information in an hour session or something like that. So you start to ramp up into it as opposed to say, oh yeah, we want, showing up and we lost this government grant and we heard about this social enterprise thing, that's going to be our magic bullet. So I think, yeah, right. And so I think it's like trying to find the right resources and ramp into that over time and learn that way. And the other groups are, far along in understanding how social enterprise has been leveraged perhaps by their peers in the sector. Maybe have a project concept in mind, but haven't fleshed out the details. They need to clarify their project. And I think this is a lot what Jane's talking about. Really understanding the financials, understanding what impact those financials are going to accumulate over time, understanding what team and how they're going to set themselves up to execute over time. So kind of clarifying those details. So anyway, that's my 2 projections.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just add, access to capital is obviously a huge barrier. I think there's, in this space, in finding, call it, that seed capital, that early stage capital, there's not a huge amount of expertise or funds or people that you go out there and say, well, we've been in the venture capital social enterprise space for, 30 years or more. Like it's an evolving space, but it is developing quickly. Just as an example, we were in Toronto last week for an event, and I think I tallied there's 4 or 5 venture funds raising money currently, in different provinces, and they're combined raising about $100 million. Which isn't a huge amount in the grand scheme of things, but if you're thinking about $100 million into small and growing businesses that are needing that $100,000, $200,000, $500,000 check to help them get to that next stage where then you're building a viable business that you can go to those more traditional ventures, but we need to build the expertise in that earlier stage capital with people that know how to look at this double standard that we put all the businesses up against. We're in the finance world, we just looked at ratios and business models, and now we're holding business to another standard on the social environmental side. So that capacity building that's definitely growing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So something that I think is an interesting barrier that relates to the access to capital is that we're not helping businesses understand what kind of capital they need at what stage they're at. And so they go looking for the wrong thing. They spend a lot of time dealing with the wrong people, asking the wrong question.
Yeah.
The reason why we've stuck to loans is because it's a sweet spot that's missing. At a certain, as you're growing as a company, so you've got the love money, your mom, dad, and aunt, and uncle, and everybody gave you some money to get going, or you got some grants and you're moving up a bit. And then there's a place in the middle where you need to, where it's good if you could buy the money, because then you're not giving away part of the company to get into equity or into an angel investor. When they say on Dragon's Den, what's your valuation? Well, most of them shouldn't know. It's too early for them to actually know what the right answer for that is. So what we found is that there's a place where if you can give somebody some money, sell them the money to buy that answer, to buy themselves enough time to get to the right answer, then they can come. Then they're ready to even find out that they can't access capital because there isn't any somewhere else.
Did you answer your own question?
Yeah, thank you. I think so.
Perfect.
That's a quintessential G
but
question.
But do you feel people know what kind of money they're coming to you for?
Maybe not necessarily. Maybe they do have in mind. Like, you have to remember, these are some of these businesses are very personal, and it's something that people have developed and put all their sweat and tears, and the thought of giving away some equity to somebody else is just a non-starter.
Yeah.
But then loans, on the other hand, it adds business risk. It creates a commitment that you have to be. Hopefully, you have a really nice lender, that can work with you as you're growing. But overall, it does add risk. And so at earlier stages of your company's development, does it make sense to take on business risk when, in some cases, you should be taking any money you're making and redeploying back in it and growing your business. So it is, I think, very dependent on your personal attitude towards business risk and creating partnerships if you are going to give up that.
Free money's always better.
Grants are great.
Grants are great.
Grants are great. If we could get one through the IRP program,
I do want to say there's a role as well for the supply of capital to kind of innovate in this. So
Yes.
loans are great, but we can even let's add some nuance to that.
Oh,
So
sure.
there's like term loans with pretty fixed recurring principal and interest payments, perhaps on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
And then there's some more sort of flexible loans.
Yeah,
so
we got some
you've
of those
both.
too.
Okay, so kind of variable interest and
Oh, yeah.
variable term, maybe half, unsecured on some unsecured.
Imaginative is the
Yeah.
word.
Okay. Imagine. Do you want to share something that?
Well, we do. We've got every kind of way you can think of. So there's blended terms. There's long-term mortgages. There's ones where, we'll back off and maybe join charge interest or give a whole holiday.
Right.
We really try to work.
Yeah.
Because if we get it wrong and destroy an organization that's doing good in the community, then I feel.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think it's really about, let's map those cash flows. Let's get comfortable about the cash flows that the organization is about to generate and do some sensitivity analysis on that. And then sort of structure the investment that way. It does take some extra effort. You can't just do plain vanilla, loans, but it works out.
Tell my board.
I think it's a really unique experience, Travis, to have you kind of coming from the more traditional investment side and then into this space. So are there lessons that you learned in that space that you would say, we absolutely need to be taking in this space? And are there lessons that you're like, thank God we don't do that, because that's a little bit.
Yeah. I would say yes and no. I mean, one of the main lessons I find is that, there's a lot of rules and regulations that you can easily fall into on the traditional side with accounting and reporting and how you speak to investors about your projections. But I think that all kind of generally applies into social finance. But one key piece is going to be maintaining its identity, so that social finance doesn't fall back into the traditional world. What's bugging me the most is you're seeing all this prolific growth of ESG funds coming out of everywhere, and you open them up and it's Amazon and Apple and Google, and it's like, are these really the types of businesses that you're wanting to invest in? So maintaining an identity and set of principles, intentionality, and then a commitment to measuring your impact. I think those all are principles that have been applied in different ways into traditional finance that the social finance side really needs to commit to and create that identity so it doesn't get just washed out with people trying to jump on a bandwagon. Sorry, kind of went off.
No, that's
Jane, you were going to add something?
Well, I was going to say, my board members often would like me to have more discipline and learn the sorts of stuff that the governors have. Because there's stuff we can learn from that. But on the other side, we're working in a field that has different sorts of time frames and different sorts of. I think being able to put an imaginative lens on some of this is useful too. So it's a balance of both. Take what we can learn from it. It is a balancing act, very much is a balancing act. And the banks are required to have certain sorts of rules. We all want our deposits to be secure. I don't want Mo to lose my money. So we have certain expectations about how they behave. Our investors have a different lens on what they're doing. The general marching orders at the beginning was get the money out there, make it do some good, and try not to lose too much of it. Oh yeah, and pay for yourself. So that was the so. But it's to try to find the right balance.
Okay, I'm just looking at the time. Let's talk about the mythical investment readiness. Is that what
I think
is anybody?
mythical is an excellent
Who's in the room to talk? Who came to this specifically to be like, what the hell's the IRP and when is this? There we go. Okay. So, I'm not going to do this because I'm not getting paid. No, I'm joking. But who can explain the investment readiness
Do you want
program.
me to take the first stab
Can you
at it, and
want to
then-
take a swing and then,
Yeah. Okay, so in the last federal government budget, there was a commitment to creating something called the Social Finance Fund. Came in two steps. One is about $755 million that they promised would be capital available to put into social finance. It's going to be a matchable kind of thing, and the money is going to be placed into intermediaries to invest into the ecosystem. None of that money's in the budget yet, but this fiscal year and next fiscal year, they made a provision for something called the Investment Readiness Program, which was to help social purpose organizations. Don't ask me for a definition, haven't seen anything really yet, maybe you'll want to wade into that. That would help those entities prepare themselves to access social financing. With me so far? Though that part is to be grants, they're calling it seed capital, because we said, let's try to at least get some social finance language into here. And so those will hopefully be ready soon. So the federal government has signed contracts with, in total, 22 different organizations which have some piece of this puzzle. McConnell's one, Newmarket's another. The piece in the middle is the entities which will actually write the grant programs and then take in the applications. And that maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, can you give us?
Yeah, you go next, and then I'll.
Sure. So, the major granting partners, so the non-repayable capital partners, the ones providing that, are Canadian Women's Foundation, Community Foundations of Canada, Chantier in Quebec, NACA, which is the National Aboriginal Capital Corporations Association, and NAFC, so National Association of Friendship Centers. So the latter two, if the name doesn't apply, it's more for Indigenous-led or Indigenous-oriented organizations. So for my guess is for most of us in this room, it's likely community foundations. So I'd be surprised if, unless we already know.
Yeah,
we do know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Community Foundations Canada has been asked to put those grants out across all parts of English-speaking Canada, and so they are now contracting with consortiums of community foundations across the country to actually be the on-the-ground delivery system. In Alberta, the Calgary Foundation and the Edmonton Community Foundation put together a proposal that went for those two foundations and said they would do it for Alberta through two entities. One, Brooks's Alberta Alberta Ecosystem Project, which is a loosely affiliated group of entities of nonprofit associations, foundations, a whole ABC Connects, a whole lot of people who've been working in the social innovation, social impact investing sector in Alberta. CFC Canada accepted the proposal. Oh, and Seth's going to said we would do the technical work on the ground. So keeping the paper flowing and all that stuff. And so we are now waiting for the contract to see what that looks like. We're waiting for the eligibility criteria to see what that looks like, and also the application process.
So can we talk process just a little bit? So
Yeah.
we have these national organizations in the community foundations have
Yeah.
now said, okay, this is going to be meant. Like, not apparently, I knew I was part of this, but I want to slink away when we said talking.
Yeah, because there's a lot.
Yeah.
Forgive us, there are a lot of things we're going to have wonky answers for because we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't
So-
think we haven't been saying, well, that's a stupid answer. Tell us what's actually going to happen. But
Doesn't exist.
bear with us. Yeah, it doesn't
So,
exist.
but what's going to likely happen is you'll be bumping into this stuff, right? So we've seen it with Inlow. Like I'm sure some of you maybe heard about this through Inlow, McConnell Foundation, you're out there, New Market Funds. So can you tell me about those other kind of intermediary
Yeah.
roles? What does that look like?
For Alberta specifically,
Well, no, maybe just more broad, because I imagine
broadly.
there's going to be
Okay.
kind of,
Okay.
yeah,
And
can you
then
talk about
you
McConnell and then New Market?
Yeah, okay, so So there's lots of other roles out there. Some are just knowledge dissemination. So the Center for Social Innovations, the SEDNets, Startup Canada's. I'm probably missing a bunch, but they will just be promoting, I think, what social enterprise is all about, what the social economy is all about in Quebec, for instance, what the role of social finance can be in the sector. There's going to be social R&D, as I've already mentioned, so I won't go over that again. There's impact measurement approaches, so investment into this common approach to impact measuring so that we can talk the same language, and when we're measuring things in our individual organizations, we have the opportunity to roll that up and get a sort of coherent picture. I'm probably missing a bit, but yeah.
Newmarket was given money to help support the development of the National Impact Investment Practitioners Table.
Yeah.
It's an MIPS,
Travis,
right?
what is
Yeah. I mean, it's basically, if you think of building capacity of the financial intermediaries, so it's like, how do we have more social enterprise funds, local investing YYCs, other intermediaries across the country that can help? Because one of the goals of the government with their federal fund is they're looking for, is it a 2 times type of investment that's coming from the private sector. And so that will typically come from other fund managers. So how are we strengthening the intermediaries across Canada? So that's the work that Newmarket Funds is doing.
So really, I mean, if we were to sum it up, it's trying to build some foundations amongst kind of capacity building for social enterprises and people thinking, and that's it, capacity building on the investment side, and then measurements and all the pieces underneath that. That's what this money's for. So then when the $755 million comes down, we have a better kind of ecosystem and foundation to actually utilize that money in an effective manner. Is that a good way?
Well
and
done.
how that happens is, being sorted out. And so,
Except that it'll all be sorted out hopefully very soon,
Yeah.
because the first half of the $18.5 million that's coming into English Canada for social purpose organizations has to be out the door by the 31st of March, 2020.
Keep those business plans together.
And the second half of it has to be out the door the 31st of March, 2021. So get your thinking caps on.
And the first call for those proposals is coming out sort of end of this month, early December of this year.
I think it's been moved back 2 weeks.
No, well, I was just on a call on yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what they're still saying. So,
get ready for more of this, by the way. This will be my job, though, not yours. So everything will look normal and great on your end, and I'll have an ulcer.
That duck thing where it looks calm.
Just one more piece, and then we'll open up for questions. So I just want to, really quickly, where do you see the future of not only the IRP process, but where's the future of kind of social investment going, in your opinion? What do you see the bright lights here?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like I mentioned, I think if it's able to maintain an identity behind it, then it starts to become an option where hopefully it can start getting into hands of any kind of investor. Because right now it can be quite selective. So coming up with new products, if there's more funds, more accessibility, more definition around impact investments, that there's more products that are going to be available for general public. So that's, I think, a longer term project, but I think that's where I can see this going, so long as you can maintain, the principles behind it.
Nice. Jane, what do you think?
I hope that it becomes normalized. I hope it becomes that what I do daily is not considered such a weird thing, where I could put my money easily into something into this, and where people who need this kind of financing can get it. I wish. So I hold great hope for companies like Shandos, for example, who are onboarding it as a way of being, instead of just some strange also-ran thing.
Wayne, what about you?
Echo very much what Jane is saying. I think it's going to be the new norm. And maybe that's the long-term horizon, and then maybe in the short-term horizon, it's going to look like, just as we've demonstrated in sort of traditional finance markets, just a slew of onslaught of all sorts of innovation, product innovation, I think we're going to see a lot of that coming forward too. So revenue share agreements and using, sort of more flexible, entrepreneur-friendly, but still financially viable tools. So I think the tool set is going to be broader.
Nice. Let's open it up to questions. Feel free, this is an amazing group of people that are looking at this from a bunch of different angles, so please throw them up and make them hard.
How are we going to stay up to date with all this information?
With knowing when this is going to go
Yeah,
on.
what's going on?
Just keep watching James' Twitter.
The Alberta ecosystem, which is going to do the front-facing piece, but we'll try to get the word out because there's lots of partners in that group who are into all different segments. And, probably we could do something like get the email list of this and drop something out.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's going to be, like I said, we have kind of like arms out in essentially every community in Alberta and people that frankly are running this conference and other places. So using them as kind of intermediaries to get that information out.
If you heard about this conference, probably you're in the right networks to have heard something. So
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say my hunch is gonna be it's gonna be more information and less, and it'll probably be, this is just my hunch,
It'll be
because
so
I'm
similar.
already you'll be hearing it from McConnell Foundation, Weave, all these other groups, and I think it'd be more just parsing out who the hell do I talk to to actually make this happen.
Yeah,
There
that
will
would
be a portal, an online
Yeah.
portal, we're told, where the applications will go.
Yeah, actually, as of yesterday, there is a URL, but it goes to a site that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, so let's not send people there yet.
I'll give it to you just so that you know, but you can monitor it. It's IRP-PPI, so IRP, the French version of IRP.ca.
Gail's got her hand up.
Are there priorities for the IRP? What are some of the priorities that you may know about today or yesterday?
Yeah.
What do you,
Priorities.
What are the government's priorities? And
their first priority is to get this out as far-reaching as they can. What they expect to come back, I think they're a little puzzled still about. You think that's fair? So it's any way that you as an organization can think of to be better at what you do, and perhaps that how you would approach being able to use financing. So planning that you have to do.
Yep.
Financial modeling that you have to do. Do you have to hire a consultant to get the plans done to renovate your building so you can capture a revenue stream?
Feasibility studies.
Studies.
You can also
what about location?
Location.
Of where this happens?
Yeah.
All over Canada, and so rural, cities, small cities, everywhere. We need to reach everywhere in the province. We have a slight interesting deviation in that if you are in an area around Medicine Hat and Lethbridge, they decided to go their own way. We don't have the border drawn yet, but we'll get you into the right pool when that happens. So.
Probably a question for Travis. Given that securities legislation is provincially mandated, does that complicate the supply side?
It can, yeah. I mean, there are some harmonized agreements, across provinces, but there may be different caps on how much, particular investors can participate in a raise. So it can, they call it interprovincial, fundraising is a bit more challenging. But I think that's, fairly harmonized across the board in terms of securities exemptions that you might be looking for.
Your co-op model, for instance, you'd have to do some interprovincial work to actually start operating Saskatchewan.
Yeah, I mean, there's similar types of, these types of investment co-ops all across the country. And so it depends really on what that provincial Cooperatives Act might be and how they treat it. And so you may have to look at it on a province by province basis.
I was told recently that Yukon was the best place to go because they have the best rules.
Okay.
I have no idea what he was trying to pull my leg.
I think most often on the product side, it's BC, Alberta, Ontario, and then often some groups will go the extra step and try and get it to Quebec as well.
Yeah.
So I'm very new to this space. So we're a very purpose-driven organization that has a massive social impact. We've been in this for 40 years, but it's
Wow.
the first time that we foray into this. where do I go? Because all this feels like, okay, yeah, we should go for this, but I have no clue as to who can help, given that we've never applied for a grant or we've never, yeah.
Inlow.ca is maybe a good first stop. And if Inlow isn't the right fit, you can always get in touch through the contact there. And we try to play a wayfinder role as well. So, yeah, we can kind of meet you where you're at and direct you accordingly.
I drink coffee with people.
I'm familiar with McConnell and through Inlow, so that's a great initiative for capacity building. So my question was with other funds, like Social Enterprise Fund and curious. So and you will be an implementer, I understand. So are you ready, or have you done some kind of needs assessment to see what really, what the enterprises might need to, they have a good idea, they have a good plan, but still there are some things like outcomes measurements, like impact measurement, right? Something that we've helped, but that's not enough, that's very competitive, right? So, and only a very limited number of organizations can have it. So is there, would it be able to, would it be possible to have a intentionality around that, impact measurement as a, let's say, capacity building and requirement that was a long-term practice in international development. So I don't know why it's still not.
Do you mean in our own work or through this readiness program?
No, I meant overall.
Overall.
The fund, the investors who are investing.
Yeah.
I do understand you're already providing investment money, but that's I think it's a win-win when the capacity building is considered.
I think some of this has been, we have to pick our fights to a certain extent. We can't get everything done that you could do. I know I'm at the point where I want to have a more coherent discussion inside of Alberta, at least, around how do we build our own capacity inside the province and understand what the missing pieces are. There are companies like Trico Foundation here in Calgary has focused on helping organizations do an appraisal of their own operation. Royal University does work inside the institute there, McEwen in their Institute of Social Innovation. So there are pieces to this. Some of it is just because it's still kind of new. We've been in it forever, and that's only 10 years. So there's a lot of things that are starting to come up, and yeah, you're right, we do.
Do you guys think that the IRP process, given that a lot of organizations are going to be applying for different supports, right? Is that going to give us some meaningful data to start to identify oh wow, there's a lot of gaps in marketing, for example, or
I hope so, although I'm concerned about the fact that the clock's ticking. We've only got 16 months left, right?
Right.
So job one will be make sure the resources are out there.
Yeah.
Some of this makes me crazy because I like the plan, right? But there is no plan. But I don't, the reason why I decided we would try to get involved, even though my gut is screaming, stay away, is because it's an incredible opportunity. It's resources that we could have access to. And if even a part of it works, and we get some good results out of it, then that will be something for us to say, look, when you do this, it works. So that's the spirit that John went into it, that we're going to make this damn thing together. I have hopes that maybe we'll get through this first round, and then maybe we'll be able to all take a deep breath and make some sense out of how we use the second round.
Wayne from McConnell, yeah.
Yeah, a couple additions. I would put the common approach to impact measurement on your radar screen, specifically for your outcomes measurement questions. So they're essentially trying to make a clearer sense and clearer picture out of all the various impact measurement tools out there. So IRIS and Pulse and B corporations and SDGs analysis and all that. So they're trying to make sense of all that. and have a single language that we can kind of, as much as possible, share across Canada. So that's one thing, and I forgot the other one, but maybe we'll back to it. Oh, actually, yeah. The Albertan government has a resource on the website of some 300 plus different resources available. So, yeah, I don't know the link offhand, but it's probably accessible.
Any other questions? Come on, people. Like, I'm going to start asking Matcher questions. Sad for everyone. There we go.
Okay, yeah, there we go.
I want to monopolize, but I can talk to all you folks later. So 2 questions. One is, in your opinions, are all B Corps social ventures? Why or why not? And then the second is investment readiness, mostly to Wayne, but what does that, how is McConnell talking about what that means? Or have you heard anything? Because I'm hearing no, but what are the feds talking about what that means?
And your first question was B Corps?
Yeah, are they social enterprises? Why are we not?
Are they social
Are they all?
Are they all social?
I think B Corporation is a ratings certification scale. So there's a minimum threshold of 80 out of, I think, 200 points. So, yeah.
I think
Go ahead.
it's a good question.
Yeah.
So, because you could have B Corps who are insurance companies, or you could have B Corps who are, fund managers. So to say, I think it's looking more at the venture, side of things that is more of the distinguisher, in finding a business model that you're trying to have a positive, outcome with the business model. So I would say probably no, not everybody is, because you have a lot of, you call that service, service providers.
They might be on the more yes side, but yeah.
Part of me doesn't care, really,
Yeah.
because there are so many different definitions
Yeah.
of this stuff. That's a really interesting conversation over beer.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's are you delivering the kind of, like what we look at is, are you delivering the impact that our investors want to create? And so that's enough. I've also stopped thinking about social enterprise as a noun. I think about it as a verb. It's a way of being, it's not a thing. So in a way, the B Corp thing is an interesting way to get a taste of it. And I would probably lean more to assuming that they're a social enterprise the way we would want to see them to be. But
And the second question was around, what does it mean to be investment ready? Like, what's the definitions around that?
Yeah. And I think it's like, I think the real, I think the real sort of, it when you have investment.
Kind of like when you're pregnant. You'll just know you're pregnant.
The same answer to both questions. It's like, you can kind of know when you have a social mission organization, you can kind of point to it. It's like, you know it when you see it. So that's the real marker. And then there's some like proxies to that. So, clarity in a business plan that makes sense. There's like a term sheet on the table with the finances that makes sense. There's a legal structure that is investable, stuff like that. So the list could go on. There's,
I did say at one point in frustration, is it okay if the answer is no, after all the work that you've paid for happens? And
Right.
they did say yes, that's okay. You've at least learned something in the process.
Yeah, and I think the intention is, I think the intention is that not 100% of the organizations that apply end up saying going for a feasibility study, and that feasibility study comes back 3 months later and says, that is a bad idea, don't go for it. I think the intention is that that's going to be part of the portfolio that gets supported, and that's a necessary piece of innovation and the work that needs to happen. But ultimately, yeah, it's the impact that everyone wants to see at the end of it. So.
I'd like to hear from all four of you. What is a social venture in Alberta that you sort of thought to yourself, this is really great, but no one knows about them, or why don't they get press? Like, who are the, I don't want to have you be on the spot for this, but I'm really just curious about some new
How
ventures.
many days have we got? I brought some of our portfolio, that's a little publication we put out, and there's lots of stories on our website too about our clients, about stuff they're doing. I'll tell you one quick story. My favorite one of my favorite ones right now, and it's always the latest one. So a group of Somali women in Edmonton had started, in a way to get out of the house, had started a sewing club, and they did a little bit of food preparation. So now they got a storefront where they are teaching women business practices, and they're doing sewing classes and cooking classes. They're feeding people. They actually have a kitchen that you can come and eat lunch at. So, and it was a way to teach and become more integrated in their new home, their new community, with the business skills that they already had. And really, underneath, it's a way to get women who traditionally in an immigrant family are the ones who are left at home. The kids go out to school, dad's out to work, they're at home, and so they're not the ones that become part of it. And that's really the play they're making.
Travis, how about you?
Yeah, I don't have a specific, I just imagine, there's a lot of small business owners out there that just generally, in their practice, they are focused on community.
Yeah.
Or they're focused on employing people that maybe need a leg up or need support. So I just feel that those are probably the ones that don't get the glitz because they're not like a B Corp certified, venture capital funded. These are mom and pop shops that just have a soul to their business.
They're just doing the work.
And they're so busy working on their business that they don't have time.
So that's entrepreneurs are often.
Yeah, so I imagine like that's just businesses in our community in general that is that a social enterprise? Yeah, a lot of their practices they are, but are they getting the glitz and recognition? Probably not.
Do you have one in particular that you really find?
That jumps out? Maybe to invest in this business, but it's a mechanical shop, that employs people with barriers, and he's, the individuals kind of came coming from a similar background, and it's his way of now, being able to kind of give back.
That's fabulous.
Wayne, how about you? You're out and about.
Yeah, there's lots of examples, but I hesitate to name some of them because you're probably already familiar. So I'm trying to think of an unusual suspect. Maybe we can chat after.
I have one that's super unusual. That it's a group out of Edmonton called Edmonton Eats.
Yeah.
And so it's a mentor of mine named Maureen Murphy-Black, who has retired like 6 times. Every time she retires, I write her a letter that says like, see you in 6 months. And she calls me with like this. So she started, and I think the real interesting part, so the idea is, if you've ever traveled abroad, you can do things like eat with and stuff, where you eat with a local family and you pay for that meal and all that stuff. So she was away abroad, came back to Edmonton, and she lives in the Northeast, which is a bit more of a depressed area of Edmonton. And so said like, well, why can't we take that same concept and like have people in that community, serve food and stuff? And so the really cool part about it is like, I was involved in the very beginning, kind of, helping out with the business plan and stuff like that. And I would I'm now a board member, like reluctantly, but I would kind of like come into this every once in a while. And every time I came, she'd have like 4 more partners. So like Nate's Culinary School came on board to basically, so now what you have is like mainly immigrant families working with the Nate Culinary School to basically like share back and forth, like one, how to scale meals, but also that, and then serving this unreal.
Nate puts on the dinner.
Nate puts on the dinner.
The family is directing.
The family directs the whole thing. The family takes 70 to 75% of the take home, like off the top. We had people like Giant Tiger, like a local Giant Tiger. They're all independently owned, apparently. They were putting in money, and actually they paid for tickets for all the other families that are going to provide meals in the future to come to this one. But every time I show up, there's like another amazing person there that's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna work on this, and like I think we're still working through the business model and whether or not it makes sense, but also taking it really smartly to say like, we're gonna test this out a few times at Nate, a few times in the community, and just see if it works, right? And even in that little testing, like, that the first family that ever did this walked away with $2,500 that night.
That's cool.
Right? So that's cool. Right? Anyway, and it's totally under the radar. And it's neat.
Has anyone heard of Iron and Earth? Is that like well known? Okay. I mean, that's a group that we're working with, and they're basically retooling and reskilling fossil fuel workers, but they're doing it full value chain. So they're, sort of doing that education bit, but they're also doing the project development of the whatever wind farm or renewable, solar PV farm, and sort of creating a direct employment opportunity right away. So it's not just training; it's here's your career path essentially.
So is there a business, like I saw a bunch of hands go up that said like, I have a business or I'm looking for investment.
Yeah.
Who's got a story? Where are you at? What are you dealing with? We have a few.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
We've actually been dealing in the enterprise world, helping very large organizations work better together. So historically through technology integration, but now we've evolved to also offer social technologies. So how do we actually shift the way we're showing up at work, working together to create, collective intelligence and solve large challenges. So what I would love to be able to do is actually offer that service to people that can afford to pay us our usual fees that large companies can pay. I'd love to work with smaller companies and help them collaborate better to solve the challenges that they have. So that's one idea. We make good money on the other side, but like I want to help. So, but how do we do that without getting paid potentially, but we're having a massive impact with the people we work with?
What's the matter with figuring out who the customer is in that case to pay for those other?
As an example, if a foundation is investing in different organizations, I know I can help those organizations work better. So how do we create that thing?
You might be able to you might be able to do paper performance type models. So if you can, so if you can sort of pick out a specific independently verifiable metric, and if you achieve that metric, then people would buy that outcome from you.
Well, we do measure the impact of the work, so yeah.
I also think like dig into that market a little bit. There's more money than
I think so. Yeah.
Like there's willingness and an ability to pay a lot of the time. I think we often think of nonprofits and like we don't have, we started looking into tech utilization in the nonprofit space, and it's like hundreds of millions of dollars. Right? Like it's a lot of money in that space. I mean, it's not relative to other, but it's a lot more money than you think.
And if you can address a real pain point, you're willing to pay for it.
Yeah. How about, so now the flip side, there was a lot of hands that went up like investors. And so where are you at in your investment journey? Who has a story about like, hey, I'm either investing currently or I'm exploring this, and what does that look like?
Or got a bag of money you want to put somewhere?
Yeah, we're doing another raise New Year, so.
We said we were trying not to turn this into like a timeshare type of thing. Have you met Travis? So who has, who's in there, like wants to share a story about their investment journey a little bit? Anybody?
Close to the chest on that one. That's good.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
I've made my first 4 private investments, including Local Investing YYC. One, CoPower, which is out. They just got bought. Like that doesn't matter because it's bond, but they just got bought by Man City, which is awesome. And then 2 private companies locally. And it's a challenging journey as a young person who doesn't have a huge amount of savings, but is trying to do this. And so I'm curious about this kind of investment education piece, because there are kind of local angel groups, but I think as people want to deploy their capital and want to invest in those family, friends, and fools rounds, because 2 of those companies are not doing that well right now. And so, I don't know, I guess tips there, because I think when talking to peers who are much more experienced than I am in this space, it's still really challenging. So how do we deploy capital locally with meaning and impact and still be able to save from our retirement?
I'm in there at the same journey, I think, personally.
So I represent a public foundation, and we actually have offices across Canada, so for my cross-border question. Our problem is, for instance, you went to the Edmonton Foundation, about $55 million, so it's a single investment manager relationship, and that's what I'm looking for. I don't want to go to each province and start to work out investment relationships across Canada, or at least English-speaking Canada. It's a scale issue for us, and that's my challenge, is trying to find. I'd love to see the industry consolidated, similar to how the ESG investing or SRI investing came together years ago, I mean 25, 30
Yeah.
years ago, it was at the same grassroots level. It has now become, as you mentioned, almost the brown paper bag. You have to look inside the bag to see what you're actually buying, but at least it is more, you actually have a brown paper bag now.
Yeah. So it's not a community foundation, it's a private foundation.
It's actually, well, no, it's not a community foundation. We are donor advised, so we'll grant money to any charity in Canada.
Sure.
So that way our community is Canada.
Yeah, because what I was going to say is that we're the community foundations, a couple of the foundations that have been in this for a while are actually looking at creating what I think of as the trainer wheel version of consolidating, doing some syndicated deals. So we'll bring all the foundations, big and small, that want to put money on the table together, and by example, examine some deals together so that everybody gets to see the deal and see how the due diligence process goes, so that we can hopefully by the end of it have more people who are interested in doing this. And I've been wondering whether we should open up to more than just community foundations.
So we can't be partly because of our mandate. We're not invited to be at the CFC table.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that we can't set up another club. That's easy.
There's that NIPS group, so the
NIPS,
national-
the NIPS group, you should probably maybe,
Yeah, consider them.
yeah,
There's also
send me your stuff and all.
Addenda Capital, so that would be a one-stop shop. You could invest in their product and their Canadian, they manage operators group monies.
And Rally Assets is
Rally
working
Assets,
to put some of that kind of stuff together too, yeah.
All right, I think we are at time. It's 2:15, and I believe we have a 15-minute break, and then we're meeting for the keynote. So thanks so much. Please give a huge... and yes, find these people as they're walking around and pick their brains, please.